Thank you all for your practice. So tonight, I want to talk about this practice of Metta Vipassana. These words might be familiar to some of you. They might be a little unfamiliar to some of you. This word metta is generally translated as loving kindness. Metta is what is called one of the four Brahma Viharas. These words Brahma Viharas, Brahman in the time of the Buddha was the word for God. Vihara means something like abode or dwelling. So this literally means like the divine abodes. The Buddha called them the sublime abidings. And these Brahma Viharas are also what we call the heart practices. And there's four of them. They're metta, which I said generally translates as loving kindness, which I'll kind of go a little more in depth on that in a minute. Karuna, which translates as compassion. Mudita, which translates as appreciative joy or joy for others. And equanimity. And the thing about metta is it really builds to all of these other practices. We really can't build compassion without love and kindness for others. We can't have appreciative joy for others without love and kindness for others. And we can't really get to this place of equanimity, which is, equanimity is normally translated as, I like the translation of right in the middleness. So it's like the middle path. The Buddhism is called the middle path. And equanimity is this place of being right in the middleness. And it's not really any different than the words nirvana or nibbana. They're all kind of the same thing. They all kind of mean the same thing. And it's just being okay when we're not okay. It's just being okay with whatever arises. So I said metta is normally translated as loving kindness, which I think is kind of a clunky translation. The word metta actually is rooted in the Pali term mita, the Sanskrit word mitra, which literally translates as friend. So metta, for me, really, I think kind friendliness is a better translation because love is a really loaded word in the first place. Like there's so many different levels to love. And I think I've said this before, but I love so many, like we use the word love for so many different things. Like I love my partner, I love my mom, but I also love pancakes, so like where do we draw the line with what love is? But so I think kind friendliness is just a little bit better of a translation. But I don't think we're going to get rid of the translation of loving kindness anytime soon, so that's what I'm going to use for this talk. So this practice of metta comes from the Karanaya Metta Sutta, which Karanaya means what should be done. Metta means loving kindness, and sutta translates as discourse, basically. So this is the discourse on what should be done, and what should be done is love. And this practice came from, in the time of the Buddha, during the rainy season, which lasted about 3 months in India, they would go on retreat for these 3 months in order to not trample the plants and the crops because it was the rainy season. So the Buddha instructed all of the monks and nuns to go retreat into the forest for this 3-month period. And so he sent them off into the forest. There was a group of about 500 monks and nuns. And what happened is when they got to the forest and they started meditating, everything was going fine. And then eventually, this is going to sound a little silly, but what are called the tree devas, or the tree ghosts, basically, started just harassing all these monks and nuns. They started clawing at them and ripping their clothes and there was like this really bad smell that they created. And so it made their practice almost impossible. So what do we do? These, they go back to the Buddha and they're like, hey, we can't sit there. We're going to have to find somewhere else to go. These tree ghosts are like torturing the shit out of us right now, It's making it impossible for us to meditate. And the Buddha's like, well, this is what you do. And so I'm going to read the Metta Sutta. And this is what the Buddha said to the monks and nuns in regards to what to do about the tree ghosts. He said, this is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm, wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety. May all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none. The great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another, or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. And so the Buddha taught this sutta, this loving kindness sutta, as the antidote for fear. And the monks recited this sutta and they felt better. And not only did they feel better, but it set the ghosts at ease because they just felt the loving kindness that was radiating off of these monks and nuns. And so they went from harassing them to actually taking care of the monks and nuns. They would provide shelter for them in the rain. They would give them food. They took care of them. They took them in. Just as they cared for, as the sutta says, as a mother cares for her child, her only child, so may we cherish and protect all living beings. And that's what the ghosts did for the monks and the nuns at that point. And so it helped them in their practice. It started as a hindrance, and it became a help to them. And that's kind of how it works for me, because I used to be like the most negative person you could ever imagine. Like I felt like the universe was absolutely out to get me. Everything was out to get me. And that really came across for me in a lot of ways. It came across in a sense of lack, a sense of judgment, and a sense of fear and anger. A lot of anger. I used to be a really angry person. And it was the world that kind of made me that way. And I felt that I needed to protect myself. So the experiences that I've had through my life had hardened my heart. And it's through this practice and through this Buddhist practice that this is really like an archaeological dig of the heart. We're unearthing the heart. We're freeing the heart from the confines that we've put it in, the protective barriers that we've built around the heart. And so when I really got into this practice and I started doing these heart practices, inclining my heart and my mind towards these Brahma Viharas, towards loving kindness and compassion and joy for others, and towards equanimity. And as I said, equanimity is, it and nirvana or nibbana are not separate. And nibbana is actually an old Pali cooking term, which literally means to remove from the fire. So in the context of Buddhist practices, we're removing ourselves from the fires, the three fires of greed, hatred, and what is known as fear or confusion, delusion. And so it's a cooling off. So we're cooling off from the greed. We're cooling off from the anger and the delusion. And I think it's kind of funny that word never really went away. Cool has always been a thing, and chill is the same thing. Like somebody's really laid back when you see, you're like, oh, they're super chill. I like them a lot. They're really chilled out. And so, and this is a 2,600-year-old practice, and we're using the same term. So cool has been around for a long time in reference to the same thing, like, oh, this is super cool. And I appreciate that. I appreciate words that have stuck that long and not really changed their meaning. And so committing myself to this practice has helped me to cool off to the external forces of the world and the internal forces of my own internal voice. Because I don't know about you guys, but my internal voice can be an asshole. So I want to tell a story. I went on retreat just a couple weekends ago, just last weekend actually. And it was a difficult retreat for me because it was actually a retreat on loving kindness. And that's normally not the problem for me. For me, what the issue was is, some of you may know this already, but Tuesday of last week, one of my teachers at school was murdered. And she wasn't just murdered, she was executed, basically. And this is a woman that was very kind. She was a very good teacher. She was a very nice person. And I had been in her class. This was the second semester I had been in her class. And, you go see somebody twice a week for 6 months, you kind of develop a bit of a relationship. And so I go on this retreat, and it's heavy on my mind. It's very heavy on my mind. I left for the retreat Wednesday, and she was murdered on Tuesday. And as I was sitting in silence for roughly 3-4 days, I had a lot of thoughts that came up. There was a lot of anger again at the gentleman that did it, and a lot of judgment. And I thought, how can I ever forgive this person for his actions? And I honestly don't know that I can. I don't know that I can come to a place of forgiveness. But what I did come to over that weekend is having compassion, even for him. Because what a tortured mind you must have. What a horrible place to live in his mind must be to do something like that to another person. And even coming to that was hard for me, coming to that place of compassion. To take another person's life in such a horrendous manner. What a horrible, horrible act. But I don't doubt the capacity for change. Sometimes I doubt people's capacity for the want to change. But I do have compassion for him. What a horrible, horrible place to live his mind must be. And that makes me sad. A lot of other things came up too. Some weird stuff happened at the retreat, and there was a lot of judgment. I found out that one of the things that bothers me the most is when people cut in line to get food at a retreat. That's so annoying. So I saw a lot of judgment come up there, and I'm like, look at this asshole cutting in line. I'm like, well, stop, you're judging. Don't do that. So over this retreat, it really became clear to me that, with this practice of Metta Vipassana, which is meeting loving kindness in this, and Vipassana means insight or seeing clearly. So it's being okay with whatever arises and bringing this sense of ease to whatever arises. It's inclining the mind towards the sense of loving kindness. Because mindfulness is great, but this is a practice of doing and not just knowing, right? So like in the West and in America especially, I think mindfulness gets a lot of the attention. But mindfulness isn't this like all-encompassing panacea. It's not going to fix all of our problems. And what do we do when we're sitting with our thoughts and we have some uncomfortable thoughts arise? That's where this practice of Metta Vipassana comes in. It's like meeting whatever arises with this sense of ease and with this sense of kindness. It's the integration of this practice of metta into our field of awareness. It's saying, right now it's like this, and that's okay. And I can be with this no matter what arises. Because the world's going to throw us some curveballs. And sometimes they can knock us off course if we're not mindful. And mindfulness gives us what I like to call this sacred pause. I feel that most people are very asleep into the world. And without this practice of mindfulness, and what mindfulness really is just remembering. And it's remembering to slow down enough to give us this sacred pause to where we have the space to respond rather than react. I think most people are pretty quick to react. Whereas if we can just slow down enough, then we have options. As long as we have at least two options, I think we're in a better place than just reacting with anger or aversion or fear. So as I said, it's a practice of doing and not just knowing. And saying, do we know how to meet the impermanent, imperfect, impersonal nature of our experience with ease? Some days it's easier than others. I think the days when there's a strong sense of self, I think that's when it's harder. I think that when we forget about the impermanent nature of self and we really lean into fixed views about the world and about ourselves, it makes things much more difficult. You guys know what I'm talking about. Those days where you're just like, I'm not okay. It's not okay. It's never going to be okay. And I'm the only fucking person this has ever happened to, ever. I had one of those days like last night. It was one of those days for me. I was like, nothing is ever going to be all right. Everything sucks. It's always going to say, wait a minute, stop. It's like I said, those days are the hardest because when the mind starts tripping, it's hard to stop the mind from tripping. It'll continue to trip until we intervene on it. And most of the time, it's shit that's out of our control. We can't even do anything. Most of life is out of our control. You know, most of it we are just passengers for the experience, and it's completely out of our grasp of control. And I think that so much suffering comes from not accepting the present experience as it is. You know, we try to avoid, change, control, fix whatever's going on. And it's just simply not the case a lot of the times. We're just not able to do that. And the only thing we can really do that does work is meeting that experience with a sense of ease and with a sense of kindness. Because did you ever get really worked up and then try to do something that was like difficult or like hard to do? You ever try to do something like hard to do when you're really pissed off? It's fucking impossible. It's absolutely impossible. It does not work out very well. So we get to this point where we start to give in to the fire, the fires of greed and hatred and delusion. And if we don't catch it and remove ourselves from the heat, that's when things start to snowball. But as I said, with mindfulness, we give ourselves this gap. We can slow down enough to just catch ourselves. And I think if we can get in front of the suffering, we can actually start to cool it off before it becomes a major issue. Only two things exist in this world and within ourselves: what's loved and what is longing for love. And I think a lot of the suffering comes from those parts of ourselves that are longing for love. All these self-judgments that we have, all these repressed fears, what Jung called the shadow, all the things we shove into the shadow. So in this lineage, in this particular lineage, the Theravadan lineage, and the way that I have been taught, we use phrases to incline our mind towards this sense of loving kindness, or these Brahma Viharas, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. And the ones that I use the most are the ones that I learned when I came into this practice, and those are generally in a meditation we'll go. We either start with ourselves or a benefactor. I find it helpful to start with a benefactor, and that doesn't even have to be like a benefactor, just a close friend, someone you care about. It can be a loved one. It can be a mentor, a teacher. I find a pet to be really useful because most of us really love our pets and we don't have any judgment against our pets. We're just like, oh, so sweet. And for me, when I got in, I did not like myself, like at all. So like for me to start with myself and wish myself loving kindness was like just almost like a slap in the face. Like, are you serious? You want me to say these things to myself? Like, may I be at ease? May I be at peace? May I be kind and gentle with myself? May I be filled with loving kindness? Me? May I be filled with loving kindness? Like, you've got to be fucking joking. And it didn't work at first. And it took a while. I had to force myself to say these phrases, and it was like eating when you're too full. It's like just trying to force it in, like, oh, may I be filled with loving kindness. And it didn't work. One thing that did work for me, though, one thing that actually worked really well for me was this trick that I learned from one of my teachers, and he actually learned it from one of his teachers, who's the abbess of Heartwood Refuge, where I was just on retreat. Her name is the Venerable Panawati. She's an old black lady, and she's super sweet, and she was actually a Baptist preacher before she got involved with the Dharma. And she taught him, and he taught me, to sing these phrases. And so I'm going to do that now. And if anybody wants to join in, please don't leave me on my own on this. But singing these phrases really it did the trick that just saying them never could. And so it goes like this. And the way this goes is it starts with, we're going to start with I, and then go to you, and then they, we, and all. It says, may I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be happy. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be happy. May they be filled with loving kindness. May they be well. May they be peaceful and at ease. May they be happy. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be happy. May all be filled with loving kindness. May all be well. May all be peaceful and at ease. May all be happy. And that worked. That worked for me. Singing those phrases put an entirely different spin on this practice for me. And there's not a lot of times that I can sing that and not cry. So I feel lucky that I didn't just start crying, because normally I do. So I invite you to try that. Try to bring these phrases in your life. And the singing really helps. It actually helps. Because I know when I have tried just shoving these phrases down, that did not work. It felt completely counterintuitive, but singing them made all the impact. And you don't have to sing it out loud. Don't walk around singing that song, because people are going to think you're fucking crazy. But in your head, just may I be peaceful and at ease. May I be happy. Shit worked. It actually works. And so that's Metta. Metta Vipassana is just bringing this sense of ease and this kindness to whatever arises. No matter how hard, no matter how difficult, just being at ease.